Our second story also deals with a major environmental issue. There are as many as 4 million miles of roads in the United States, and as Jim Newman shows us, many of these roadways, particularly in the more rural areas, act as asphalt barriers, preventing animals from moving about as their life cycles demand.
The Columbia River floodplain east of Portland. Spongy soil, shallow ponds, is a natural barrier to modern transportation. Yet I-84 cuts straight through, and motorists enjoy a riverbank landscape. But this section of I-84, set midway between wetland and river, is an Oregon roadkill hotspot. Deer, elk, beaver, otter, even bobcat and black bear run onto the freeway intending to cross it. The animals find a cement barrier in their way and then encounter cars and trucks.
Virtually every species in the state is vulnerable to some extent to the effects of roads, whether it's collisions with cars increasing mortality rates, whether it's roads acting as barriers to movement and fragmenting their habitat, or whether it's the degradation of habitat that's associated with noise from roads. There isn't a species that's not vulnerable.
Roadkill is a national problem. Approximately 1.5 million animal vehicle collisions occur in the U.S. every year. More than 200 people die in those crashes annually, experts say. And as traffic grows and road networks expand, conflict between humans and animals increases. In this escalating confrontation, though individual motorists may suffer, entire animal species may be at risk. This is Oregon Highway 26 at milepost 38 on the west slope of Mount Hood. It is a so-called active impact zone. Cars sometimes smash into whole groups of deer here.
So it seems like a substantial number of deer have been moving through here within the last 24 hours.
With excellent habitat on both sides of the highway, herds of deer cross frequently.
We had some fairly fresh coyote tracks down there. The coyotes are probably coming through here following the deer, hoping that maybe even one of them might get hit on the road and they'll have a meal out of it.
The Oregon Department of Transportation tried to control deer movement on this stretch of Highway 26.
We have these old reflectors that were designed to scatter the light from headlights of oncoming cars, and the idea was that the light reflected off of these would frighten the deer away. So the idea was at night, you keep the deer from crossing the road, avoiding collisions. But one of the problems is that these don't seem to work that well. So they were thought to be an inexpensive way of reducing collisions, but really don't seem to have done the job.
Dr. John Lloyd is a biologist with the Eco Studies Institute.
The only foolproof way to keep the deer from going across the road is to put up deer-proof fencing, but that comes with its own problems as well. You're keeping deer from getting hit on the road, but you're also preventing them from moving around as they need to carry out their lives.
Across the country, as this Wyoming Department of Transportation surveillance video indicates, deer move constantly. On this remote stretch, even a semi does not stop the deer. They temporarily retreat, but this herd seems free to feed and migrate in a healthy way.
Well, everything needs to be able to get from the bedroom to the kitchen. The scale varies from creature to creature, but the idea of being able to move and being able to link up is important for everything.
In areas where communities are expanding, some species are becoming isolated on islands of habitat too small to support long-term survival. Roads with heavy traffic can act as virtual fences. Forest Service ecologist Peter Singleton sees parts of Oregon fragmenting into pockets of habitat.
The red flags in the state, I think, are in the northeastern corner of the state, in the area between the Blue Mountains and the Wallowas, and I think in the southwestern portion of the state, the area around Mount Ashland and between the Klamath and Southern Cascades.
Interstates with heavy traffic, high noise levels, and corridors crowded with commercial development are the biggest barriers to wildlife. In Oregon, I-84 and I-5 dissect the landscape. In Washington state, I-90 through the North Cascades restricts wildlife migration. But I-90 undergoing major reconstruction at Snoqualmie Pass may introduce an innovation rarely considered in the U.S. A so-called green bridge would provide animals a way over what is otherwise an impenetrable barrier. In France, where some thoroughfares carry 50,000 vehicles a day, green bridges have become essential. Animals would otherwise be locked in shrinking territories. Green bridges in Europe are an expensive but effective way for animals otherwise imprisoned by development to avoid extinction.
We all have different needs in order to survive. Okay, we need shelter, we need food, we need water, security. All those things usually don't happen in the same place at the same time. We have to be able to get from one place to the next in order to get food, in order to get to shelter, in order to escape from danger.
In Oregon, the construction of green bridges may be a long way off. Yet, the Oregon Department of Transportation points to an innovation in bridge design that could benefit wildlife. This reconstructed bridge on Highway 26 over the Zigzag River is much longer than the previous span here. In theory, at least, animals can now move north and south of the highway without crossing 4 lanes of traffic.
It does have some advantages because certainly there's a lot more space for animals to move underneath here. And you can contrast it with the situation on the other bank, and that's very difficult for an animal to move through that kind of rock and get across underneath the bridge. Over here you have a nice flat bench. There is still some big rock to navigate through, but it's a much better situation.
But the Zigzag Bridge was designed for flood control and to promote fish passage, not as an animal corridor. There is no research to show animals would choose this underpass instead of dashing across the highway. Indeed, surveillance footage taken during a study in Arizona suggests deer and elk and other creatures tend to resist use of underpasses. Biologists believe they may fear ambush by predators. In Oregon and elsewhere, as human populations increase, the isolation of wild animals is likely to become more and more acute. It is a looming problem that may well demand a solution in the not-too-distant future.
The ability to move is one of the basic things in being able to survive. Another really important function of movement is being able to reproduce. You have to be able to move across town to find a date. If an animal can't get far enough away to move and find a potential mate, well, eventually that population isn't going to work.